I sat down on the white-painted wooden chair across from my parents and my two younger brothers, in the kitchen I once called home. The familiar scent of beef stew and garlic bread lingered in the air, evoking memories of childhood dinners. But tonight, something was off. Ethan and Caleb, my twin brothers, leaned back in their chairs, a smug look plastered across their faces. My parents, Gregory and Elise, exchanged a quick glance before Mom spoke, her voice struggling to remain calm. "We need to talk to you about an important decision." I set my fork down, tension building like a wave in my chest. "We've finalized the will," Dad continued, his tone steady but lacking warmth, "and we want you to hear it directly from us." Ethan crossed his arms, a satisfied smirk curling at the corner of his lips. "To keep it simple, everything's going to us," he said. I froze. Caleb echoed the words, his voice light, almost careless. "The house, the beach property, and everything else, it's all going to us. You're not getting anything." Silence fell. Outside, only the faint sound of cars passing broke the stillness. I turned to my mother, silently begging for denial, for this to be some sort of misunderstanding. But she only nodded, firmly. "We believe it's for the best," she said, clutching the napkin in her lap. "You have a stable job, a good income, but Ethan and Caleb are still figuring things out." I looked to my father, searching for hesitation, a flicker of remorse, but he only stared into his glass of water, avoiding my eyes. A storm surge in my chest, grief twined with a hot rising fury. I had done so much for them, helped pay the mortgage, covered medical bills, bailed my brothers out more times than I could count. And this was my reward? "So after everything I've done, you've decided I don't deserve anything?" My voice trembled, despite my best efforts to keep it steady, but the betrayal cut too deep. My mother sighed, her expression weary. "Nora, you always make things about money." I clenched my fists beneath the table, a blade of betrayal twisting deeper. "It's not about money," I said, voice low and tight. "It's about fairness. I've been there, every time you needed someone. But now, because I'm independent, I don't matter anymore?" Ethan let out a dry laugh. "No one asked you to help. You just like playing the victim," he scoffed. Caleb chuckled along, eyes glinting with mockery. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would love you the same." Ethan's words weren't just a comment. They were knives, sharp, cold, and deliberate. I turned to my parents, hoping they would speak up, hoping someone would take my side. But no, they just sat there, silent. And in that silence, I understood everything. No one needed to say anything more. I bit my lip. I wouldn't let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of them. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Something inside me twisted, like someone had just crushed the last fragile bit of faith I was holding on to. I stood up. My voice was clear, though hoarse from restraint. "All right then. If that's your decision, then I have mine too." Ethan smirked, mocking. "Oh? And what might that be?" I pushed my chair back and stood up. My heart thundered in my chest, but my eyes were steady. "From now on, don't expect anything from me." I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. No one called me back. No hand reached out. Not a single sigh. The scent of beef stew and garlic bread, once the comforting smell of childhood dinners, now felt hollow, meaningless. The clinking of forks and knives on plates, and the sound of my heart, beating like a revolt. I stepped out the door, the house I grew up in. But this time, there was no warmth, no attachment. The comfort of family dinners, the safety of childhood, it had all faded long ago. The door closed behind me, firmly, without a glance back. And I knew, in that exact moment, Everything had changed. The night air was crisp. Streetlights blurred past the car window like streaks of fading memories. A wave of heat surged to my temples. I drove, the night slipping quietly past the windows. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence, to breathe, to think. Why was I even surprised? Am I just a bad daughter? Or to them, am I nothing more than a walking wallet? When I got home, I collapsed onto the sofa. My hand trembled slightly as I unlocked my phone. The conversation still echoed in my head. Ethan got everything. So did Caleb. And me? I was the one who paid every time Ethan changed his major. The one who sent money so Caleb could show off his new car online. All these years, I've carried the weight. Every time my brother changed jobs, I sent money. Every time my parents were short on mortgage payments, I transferred funds. I worked weekends, skipped holidays, just to cover Ethan's tuition, Caleb's car insurance. And now, I'm left with nothing. I sat on the couch, phone in hand. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the banking app. I looked at the recurring payments, the ones I had kept going for nearly a decade. $1,200 a month for Ethan, $900 for Caleb, $1,900 for my parents. Each number was a fresh cut. But strangely, I didn't feel regret. I felt empty as this apartment, as empty as I was. They said I was successful, that I didn't need anything else. But if I stopped helping, could they even keep that house? I reached out and hovered over recurring transfers. For years I had accepted the burden of this responsibility, but this was their choice. They made it clear they didn't need me anymore. No one was forcing me to continue. 1 second, 2 seconds. I hit cancel. The screen flashed. Recurring payment successfully canceled. A strange feeling surged through me. Anger, bitterness. But there was also relief. I set the phone down, sinking deep into the chair, as if for the first time in my life I could breathe. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, turning over the years that had passed, the holidays I declined, the nights I worked myself to exhaustion just to have enough to send back home. I used to believe those sacrifices were worth it. But now, when all I needed was one sign that I was seen, they couldn't give me even that. The next morning, the phone rang nonstop. I sighed and picked it up. My mother's voice came through, rushed and tinged with reproach. "Nora, did you cancel this month's transfer?" I could feel her anxiety, though it was wrapped in that all too familiar scolding tone. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom," because I realized I don't have to keep doing this anymore. My mother was silent for a while. "Family is supposed to support each other, you know that. We need that money for bills." I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, family only matters when I'm the one paying for everything. I've been doing it for years, but in the end, I'm still the one never chosen." Her voice rose. "You're being selfish, Nora. How could you act like this just because of the will? It's not always about money." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not about money? I'm the one covering all the bills. If money doesn't matter, why don't you ask Ethan and Caleb to take care of you?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could picture her face, angry, confused at being called out directly. "I can't believe you're acting like this. This isn't the Nora I raised." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight in my chest. "This is me, Mom. You just never really saw me." I hung up. Didn't wait for anything else. Didn't want to hear another word from her. Standing there in my small apartment, emotions churned inside me. My mother's words, my father's, especially Ethan's, Caleb. They all came flooding back like violent waves. I knew they'd call again, accuse me, blame me. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to respond. They'd grown used to me being the one who carried everything, the family's ATM. But I no longer wanted to play that role. It was time to let go, and it was the best decision I've ever made. I placed the phone on the table, feeling both relieved and heavy. It was such a strange feeling, like standing at a crossroads, no signs, no directions, just me and my own choice. My mother said exactly what I expected, accused me of being selfish, disloyal, of abandoning the family. But what she didn't understand was that I'd heard those words so many times, they no longer meant anything. They were just empty, repeated phrases. I looked around the apartment and suddenly saw it in a new light. It wasn't just a temporary place anymore, not just a space I rushed back to in order to escape calls and guilt trips. It was mine, the only space where I wasn't burdened by anyone else's weight. Here, I could be free. I didn't have to live to please anyone. I opened my laptop and checked my bank statement. The monthly expenses lit up, money sent to my parents, Ethan, Caleb, a constant reminder that I was their only financial lifeline. But now I could see clearly, not anymore. I canceled each recurring payment one by one. Each confirmation felt like a clean break from the past. $1,000, $900 for rent, gone. $600 for utilities, done. These numbers used to be a weight on my shoulders. Now they felt like freedom. Nothing tied me down anymore to these invisible obligations I had created for myself. I sat there staring at the empty screen with no more scheduled payments. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Strangely, though, a hollow feeling crept in. I had spent so long being the responsible daughter, the one who bore what Ethan and Caleb never had to. Now that duty is gone, what would I do with myself? I sat there, staring at the empty screen with no more scheduled payments, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Strangely, though, a hollow feeling crept in. I had spent so long being the responsible daughter, the one who bore what Ethan and Caleb never had to. Now that duty is gone. What would I do with myself? I stood up, poured a glass of water, and took slow sips. Outside the window, the city buzzed on. Life carried forward. Everything looked the same, except me. It felt like a door had opened, one where I could finally make my own rules, live in my own way. The phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan said. "You cut off all the money. You think this is some kind of joke?" I read it and didn't reply. That familiar, exhausting weight tried to return, but I shook it off. A few minutes later, another message from Ethan. "You're a traitor. Don't expect anyone in this family to see you as part of it anymore." I smiled faintly. Not from joy, but from clarity, because I finally saw the truth. I was never truly part of that family. I was just their funding source. I set the phone down and stepped out onto the balcony. The night breeze brushed my skin, cool and gentle. I breathed deeply, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. It felt like I had just stepped out of a shell, shaken off every weight that had ever crushed me. I had done the right thing, and there was nothing that could make me turn back. The next morning, the phone rang again, non-stop. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Eventually, I picked it up. My mother's voice burst out, angry and desperate. "Nora, what are you thinking? Why did you cancel the money? You know we need it to pay our bills." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, trying to control the anger rising in my chest. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've already helped more than enough." "Helped? You're abandoning your family. Have you even thought about the consequences?" Your father and I sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us? I let out a dry laugh, not out of joy, but because of the bitterness in my mother's words. Sacrifice? Don't you find that ridiculous, Mom? If I owe you for raising me, then I've already paid that debt by supporting the entire family all these years. She hesitated, then her voice turned sharp again. You've changed, Nora. You've let money control you. No, Mom, you're the one who let money control you. But I'm not your personal bank anymore. She sighed and hung up. I looked at the screen, and the messages started flooding in again. Ethan, you're ungrateful. Mom's crying because of you. Caleb, you think you're better than us? One day you'll regret this. Ethan, don't you dare show your face at our parents' funeral when they die. I read each line, anger rising beneath my skin. Not a single apology. Not a single, why did you do this? They didn't care how they'd treated me over the years, just that I wasn't funding their lives anymore. The phone rang again. This time it was Dad. I let it ring and ring. I turned off the sound. And for the first time, I felt peace. When I was done, I set my phone down, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, letting the silence wash over me. Everything was quiet, a rare stillness I'd almost forgotten. No more phone rings, no more threatening messages, no more manipulation. I stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the cool morning air. This peace felt foreign and liberating. After all these years, I was finally beginning to feel free. 3 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no messages from Mom's criticizing tone. It seemed they had begun to accept the fact that I was no longer their financial crutch. Then, on a Friday evening, a message suddenly appeared on the screen. Family meeting at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. Short and cold. No explanation. I stared at the message, feeling a heavy weight rise in my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, a small, resilient voice, whispered that maybe this was the last chance for some clarity. Maybe after everything, they genuinely wanted an honest conversation. I decided to go. When I walked into the house, the tension was thick in the air. Ethan and Caleb sat silently on the couch, their eyes cold, offering no welcome. My father stood near the fireplace, face grim, while my mother sat with red, puffy eyes, as if she had just been crying. Before I could speak, my mother's trembling voice broke the silence. Nora, I can't understand you anymore. Her voice choked. How far are you willing to go to destroy this family? I frowned, unable to believe what I was hearing. What are you talking about, Mom? My father sighed, his gaze full of disappointment. You've pushed the family's finances to the edge. If you keep being stubborn, your mother won't be able to take it anymore. A bitter smile touched my lips. So now I'm the reason Mom's falling apart? What about all the years I carried this family financially? She seemed fine then. Ethan scoffed, his face scrunched in contempt. You've always been obsessed with money. You think the world revolves around you? Caleb leaned forward, arms crossed, his eyes full of challenge. You've got a good job, a stable life. Why make such a fuss? This is just the price you pay for being selfish. Each word cut like a blade, but I didn't cry. I had come here hoping for an honest conversation, but all I got was manipulation and pressure. I took a deep breath, steadied myself. If this is all you have to say, then let's not waste any more time. I'm not coming back. My mother's face went blank, like she couldn't comprehend what was happening. What did you just say? I stood up, letting my gaze sweep over the house one last time. I've done everything I could to be part of this family. But if my worth is only measured by the money I bring in, then I don't need that kind of love. No one said a word as I turned and walked out of that house. No one stopped me. I left, and this time, I left for good. 2 days later, when I returned to my apartment at midnight, I immediately felt something was off. My door was sealed shut with hardened industrial foam, covering the entire frame and doorknob. I touched the rigid, cold material. Someone had done this on purpose. My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't a harmless prank. This was a deliberate act to keep me out. I stepped back, unease spreading through me. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and checked the hallway camera. I fast-forwarded the footage, and then Caleb appeared clearly, wearing a baseball cap and hoodie. His walk, his steps, unmistakable. He was spraying industrial foam into every crevice of my door. My hands shook with anger as I immediately called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the video as evidence. One officer nodded after watching. "Do you want to press charges?" I tightened my grip on the phone, a cold chill running down my spine. If I didn't act now, he would go even further. I took a deep breath, eyes firm with resolve. I want him held accountable. The next day the phone rang again. I ignored it. Then my father called. Next was Ethan. Finally, I picked up the phone. "Nora, your brother has been summoned by the police. Why would you do this to your own family?" My father's voice was heavy, as if I had done something unforgivable. I replied calmly, "Caleb vandalized my property. If he doesn't want to be sued, he has to pay for the damages." His voice dropped. "How much?" I didn't hesitate. $3,000. How could you demand money from your own brother like that? I let out a bitter laugh. "It's not about money, Dad. It's about consequences." The next morning, my account received a transfer of $3,000, along with a venomous note. "I don't ever want to see you again." I read the words, but felt nothing. Another notification popped up. A message from a distant relative. "Nora, is it true? People say you abandoned your family while they were going through hard times." My heart twinged for a moment, but nothing could undo what I had decided. I frowned. Another message flashed across the screen, like a small but deep cut. "How could you cut ties with your parents and siblings? They raised you your whole life." I opened social media, and then I understood. The truth was no longer sacred. It had become a tool for shaping the narrative they wanted to tell. My mother, in her usual tone, a blend of sorrow and moral preaching, had written a long post on Facebook. She said I had turned my back on my family right when they needed me most, that I was selfish, heartless, leaving behind elderly parents and struggling siblings. Strangers, unaware of the full picture, rushed to judge. How sad when success makes children forget their roots. Parents sacrifice everything, and this is what they get in return? Nora must be blinded by money. Anger surged through me again. My chest tightened, not because of strangers' words, but because the people I once called family had rewritten an entire chapter of my life, turning me into the villain of my own story. No one mentioned how I had paid off most of the mortgage, so my parents wouldn't lose their home. No one said I had covered tuition fees, even personal expenses, for Nathan and Lucas. No one talked about how Caleb had wrecked my house, and how I was forced to call the police. All they left was the image of a cold-hearted daughter who turned her back on her blood. I sat in silence. 1 minute, 2, then 3. I wondered, is silence really the only way to keep peace? But it wasn't peace. It was the mask of manipulation. I opened my phone, typed into the new post field. If they've chosen to tell their story publicly, then I'll share my side of the truth too. Each word fell like the first drops of a monsoon, heavy but cleansing. I told everything. About the money I had sent for nearly a decade, never once asking for anything in return. About the house that remained standing because of me. About the tuition, the new car, the vacations they enjoyed, all because of me. I was not an ATM. I was a human being, with limits, with emotions, and I had been pushed beyond those limits. I didn't turn my back on my family. They never really considered me a part of them, unless I brought in money. And now, I chose to stand up for myself. The post went live. For a moment, the air felt frozen. Then, waves began to rise. Relatives messaged me, some surprised, some confused. One aunt asked if it was true that I had been supporting the family financially all these years. Others started questioning my mother. Some even began to confront her for distorting the truth. But the harshest reaction came from my own family. My mother called. I answered. Her voice trembled with rage. Nora, what have you just done? I was calm. I told the truth. If you have the right to share your version, then I have the right to share mine. She was breathing heavily. You're defaming the whole family. Your father is too ashamed to leave the house. Have you thought about Ethan and Caleb's feelings? I gripped the phone as if holding on to my heart. And them. Have they ever thought about mine? When I worked myself to exhaustion for this family, when Caleb destroyed my home, who thought about me? She was silent for a moment. Then, as always, she flipped the narrative. You're the one tearing this family apart. If you keep this up, don't expect to come back. We're no longer family. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. No, Mom. The one who destroyed this family was you. I hung up. No tears, no regret. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I didn't lose a family. I simply accepted that they had never truly been one to me. That call was the last time I ever heard her voice. After my post, they vanished from my world as if they had never existed. No more accusatory messages. No more midnight calls demanding something. I was free. At first, the silence felt disorienting, like wandering through an empty city. But then, I learned to listen to my own voice. I poured all my energy into work. A big project needed a lead, and I delivered beyond expectations. The day I received my appointment letter, I stood alone in my new office, looking out at the city through towering glass, where the late daylight touched each window pane. I felt my heart open. No one was holding me back anymore. For the first time, I gave myself a reward. A long trip, something I had always postponed out of responsibility. But now, nothing was anchoring me anymore. I booked a ticket to Italy, a place I had always dreamed of setting foot in, but never dared. When the plane landed in Florence, I stepped out of the airport as if stepping into a new chapter of my life. The old cobbled streets, the cafes filled with the scent of espresso, buildings that seemed to whisper about time. Each step felt like a new breath. I was coming alive again, within myself. I wandered through narrow alleys, lost myself in museums, in Renaissance paintings I had only seen in books. I ate the freshest pasta of my life, sipped bold red wine as the sun dipped below terracotta rooftops. I was no longer the woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. I was just me, for the first time, whole. One late afternoon, I sat in a small cafe near Piazza della Signoria, holding a warm cappuccino, sunlight slipping across the tiled roofs. You seem to really love this place. I looked up. The eyes of a stranger met mine like a slow beam of sunlight. He had brown hair, a smile like sunshine after rain, and something in his expression, a calmness, as if he had known me before. "I think I just fell in love with this city," I said softly, smiling as I took a sip of coffee, its gentle bitterness weaving through me like an old song. He pulled out the chair across from me without asking, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if we were two travelers who had once missed a journey together. "Me too. This is my third time returning." I tilted my head, teasing, "A faithful wanderer?" "You could say that. I'm Mason." "Nora, nice to meet you." The conversation flowed as if it had no end. He was from New York, worked in interior design, and had a near religious love for European architecture. His voice was calm and warm, sprinkled with gentle jokes that made me feel like I was in a familiar cafe, not a foreign city. I couldn't remember the last time I spoke to someone without the social mask I always wore. With Alex, there was no need to try, no need to prove anything, just two people, fully present. Authentic, like a cup of coffee that hadn't cooled yet. When I stood to leave, he smiled. "If you need a companion to explore Florence, I'd be happy to join." I hesitated for just a heartbeat before nodding. "I think I'd like that." The days that followed passed as if written in light. We wandered through colorful markets, ate gelato beneath trees, walked along the Arno River as sunset painted the sky honey gold. Mason never asked about my past, never tried to pry into the carefully hidden pieces. He just looked at me as I was, a woman learning to breathe with her own rhythm. Not to please anyone, not to save anyone, just to live. One night, we sat on a rooftop, the city shimmering below like a painting lit by memory. I smiled, not for any particular reason, just because I was being true to myself. I once believed that if I gave enough, my family would love me the way I longed for. But I've come to understand, love doesn't come from begging. Real love never asks you to trade pieces of yourself. And under the Italian night sky, I knew I was creating happiness, not borrowed from anyone, but authored by me. After I returned, the old life was still there, but I was no longer the same. I was no longer Nora, who lost herself trying to hold on to affection from a family that always looked right through her. I was stronger, freer, and closer than ever to my own self. In the months that followed, I worked hard, took yoga classes every Sunday morning, met kind friends, and began to love the life I once thought I'd never belong to. I was brewing coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Ms. Margot, my mother's cousin. "Nora, I know you're not close with the family anymore, but your parents are struggling. Your father's working night shifts at a freight yard on the outskirts, and your mother's doing hourly cleaning jobs. They look exhausted." I looked at the screen, my heart untroubled. I had always known this day would come. The years I silently sent money, they never thought of standing on their own. They leaned on me like an unconditional dock, like I was a stake in the weariness of their river. But now, with the tide receding, they had nothing to hold on to. I put the phone down, didn't reply. A few days later, an old friend texted, "Your cousin Ethan just got fired for underperforming. And Caleb's still chasing internet fame, but no one's paying attention." I just nodded. No surprise, no guilt. I had stopped being the one who carried dreams that refused to grow up. I once feared that a Christmas without my parents and siblings would feel empty. But when the lights began to twinkle outside my window, I realized I still had people who loved me truly. I hosted a small gathering at my apartment in Portland. Aunt Lori arrived early, bringing butter cookies and a warm hug. I'm proud of you, Nora, she said as I opened the door. I smiled gently. You're the only one in the family who's ever said that to me. She looked at me with quiet thoughtfulness. I just wish they'd seen your worth before it was too late. I said nothing, just poured her a glass of red wine and welcomed her to the living room. Then my close friends arrived, one by one, carrying wine, pastries, and laughter unforced. I laughed more that Christmas than I ever had. No pretending, no judgment, just me, and those who truly saw me. At midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights flickered like candles scattered across a winter sky. In that moment, I realized the invisible strings that used to bind me were gone. No more guilt for loving one-sided love. Just me, my life, and the people who stayed because they wanted to, not because they needed to. I returned to my armchair, quietly watching the light reflect through the window. Out there, the world kept spinning, people rushing. But inside me was a deep stillness, a peace I once thought only existed in meditation books. I once believed family was forever, that duty meant sacrificing, yielding. I thought if I gave enough, they would change. But the truth is, blood isn't the only definition of family. Family is where love doesn't come with a price. My parents, Ethan and Caleb, never looked at me with the eyes of someone who truly belongs. I still remember the day they quietly removed my name from the will. No explanation, just silence, like it was the final verdict on my loyalty. They thought it would break me, but they didn't realize that it gently severed the last thread between us. Now I am no longer the woman shouldering expectations that were never mine to carry. I can choose my own path, love without needing permission, live without being pulled back by the fear of rejection. I have friends who love me not for what I give them, but for who I am. I have Ms. Daisy, who quietly placed her trust in me all these years while no one else was paying attention. I look at the phone on the table. No missed calls, no messages from the family I used to belong to. And I don't feel sad. For the first time, that silence feels like a door opening, not closing. I raise my glass of wine, letting its warmth flow through my chest. I once lived for them. Now I live for myself. And that's not selfish. That's freedom. Nora's story is not just a personal journey. It's a reminder that you can walk away, not because you're selfish, but because you deserve a life where you are valued. Family isn't always the safest place. Sometimes, freedom begins the moment you step out of the space that makes you feel small. Leaving is not selfish. It's the only way to protect yourself when you are constantly taken for granted, when your sacrifices go unseen. You have the right to put yourself first, because at the end of the day, this life is yours. What would you choose if you were Nora? To stay in an old role, or to rewrite the script of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories about life and family.